Okay.
Welcome to the
Awesome.
smartest people in the room. We are glad you are here, and just by showing up, you are already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I'm pleased to present two of the literally smartest and most accomplished people I've ever had the pleasure of presenting on this platform, and I promise you will leave today thinking, wow, who knew? And you'll also leave smarter and more inspired than you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and please make some new ones. And ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those as possible during the interview. And also, please make sure your chat is set to address everyone, not just the speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors, for without their support, we could not keep this series free. Special thanks to First Horizon Bank, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, MedJet, Tennessee Brew Works, Project Music, and Better Than Booze. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome Amanda Marks. Amanda joined Apple 7 years ago. She currently leads business development across the AMP portfolio of subscription services, including managing the rights holder deals and content for Apple Music, Fitness Plus, and podcasts. She also leads Shazam, the world's most well-known and beloved music recognition app, and Apple Music Classical, which is Apple Music's new classical division and app that recently launched on March 28th. She came to Apple after 18 years in the music industry with her immediate prior job as global head of digital accounts at Universal Music Group, the world's leading music company, where she helped lead the company's transformation from selling physical goods to managing a portfolio of digital initiatives, enabling transactional and subscription revenue streams. She spent the majority of her career at the center of transformative, first-of-their-kind digital initiatives, creating new ways for content to be distributed and consumed. Welcome, Amanda. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks so much, Tom.
And joining Amanda as today's featured guest is Andy Schuon. Andy launched his career while still in high school as America's youngest radio personality. In the decades since, Andy has reached the top of leading companies across music and entertainment businesses. His passion for disruption and innovation have helped shape the course of legendary K-Rock FM in LA, MTV and VH1, Sony Music, Warner Music, Universal Music, XM Satellite Radio, Press Play / Napster, Ticketmaster, Live Nation, CBS Radio, Hot Topic Stores, his Revolt TV, and more. Yes, he has worked in every one of those cool places, folks. Today, he is head of recently New York Stock Exchange listed Loop Media Studios division, where his team built and manages more than 200 music and entertainment TV channels for businesses. Andy is powered by big ideas, creativity, and the lifelong pursuit of building brands and connecting artists and content to fans throughout his work as a CEO, a board member of public and private and nonprofit companies. It is an honor to welcome these two rock stars to our platform. Take it away, guys.
Thanks, Tom. By the way, you have more sponsors than the Super Bowl. It seems like you have are you pulling down a lot of cash for this? Or I forgot to ask for a cut. Are you getting paid, Amanda? Are you getting a host fee?
No.
Okay.
They wouldn't let me do that.
Okay. Tom, thanks for having us.
Yes. So today I am here with my very good friend, Andy Schuon. We met over 20 years ago when we were put together to try to start a novel business. Andy, why don't you tell the story of how we met?
Okay. Yeah, sure. Thanks, Amanda. And thanks for being on with me today. It is true. I mean, people say in show business, this is my good friend, but this is really my good friend, Amanda. And we did start out with a shotgun wedding. And what's crazy about it is I was working at Warner Brothers as the general manager of Warner Brothers Records. Amazing job after MTV. It was about 18 months into it. And then I got a call from Jimmy Iovine's office to come and meet him the next day. My assistant said, Jimmy Iovine wants to see you. And I thought, well, we're competitors now. We used to talk almost every day when I was at MTV. We'll get into Jimmy and Jimmy's stories later because I've got a couple of good ones that people will appreciate. There's not a day goes by Jimmy doesn't influence me in some way to this day. From his hustle and the things that he did and taught me as a mentor, for sure. But on this particular occasion, I knew that if he was calling me, it was something interesting. So I showed up at his office, and I was then ambushed by not just Jimmy, but also Doug and Edgar Bronfman Jr. And I thought, I had not met Edgar, but I certainly knew who he was. And at that time, Doug said, Andy, we've developed a company that reads like your resume. And it's record business, it's television, it's streaming, it's online, it's all of these things. We want you to do it. And I said, well, I'm at Warner Brothers under contract. And Edgar said that he would indemnify me and we'd make it all work out. And because Jimmy's the ultimate closer, I pretty much agreed to do it on the spot. Went back to Warner Brothers, kept it quiet for a few days. And then it was the City of Hope Gala on the Warner lot, the back lot of Warner Brothers, honoring Phil Corderero, who was my boss. And I was the dinner chairman that year. And we had Faith Hill and Josh Groban and a bunch of others playing. Zach Horowitz, who was the COO of Universal Music Group at the time, right? Would he have been COO then? Probably, yeah. He comes up to me basically at my place of work, and he says, Andy, this is Amanda Marks. She's going to be working with you at Farm Club. She's going to be your general manager. And I said, Zach, like, we're at Warner Brothers and you got to keep it down, looking around. And so that's how we met. And I was thinking, I don't even know who this person is. I haven't even started yet. And I've got a staff and I felt a little awkward about it, but we met. And then before long, I gave notice to Warner Brothers. Indeed, a lawsuit ensued. I was told to leave the building and not even take my personal effects. I had to leave my MTV Moon Man behind, and I think even my briefcase. And then we got everything worked out. And before long, Amanda and I were going to work building Farm Club underneath the table in Jimmy's office. We had one phone, and we were working, and hiring people and building the business, and that's how we met.
Kind of funny, but I sort of thought of us as the Knights of the Round Table, because as you remember, it was like a giant round table. And because we didn't really have an office, he had a bunch of phones in there. And so I would be under the table on the phone, and Andy would be sitting on the banquette above on the phone, like frantically going at it, trying to make things happen. Because it was 1999 and you could launch a company basically with a business plan on a napkin.
Yeah.
We had slightly more than that because I had to present a business plan to the Seagram board in order to get approval to get the money to start hiring people. But our timeline was super aggressive.
Yeah, by the time I started, which was around Thanksgiving, we knew that we had this date of January 20th that we had to do the television show. It had to premiere by then. We knew the name of the company, and Amanda had put together the initial website, sort of the initial website that we had in the business plan, and some landmark deals with AOL and a strategic alignment with MTV, which I think, as you said, wasn't really much more than kind of like our
TV deal.
And our TV deal with USA, which was really important because we were going to build this convergent company. We were going to basically take, the way to think about Farm Club was, it was an amalgamation of, at the time, mp3.com was one of the top websites in the world. People were just starting to plug speakers into their into their computers for the first time, and they were looking for content. So there were just, thousands and thousands of artists on mp3.com, and Jimmy and Doug had thought, well, we could just get a fraction of those and build a business over here. And if we have also the opportunity to maybe get a record deal and to go on television, who wouldn't want to also be on our platform? That MP3 music was non-exclusive. And then we can have our pick of the best artists from the great unwashed, and we can develop them and sign them to record deals. So we'd have a record company, we'd have a television show, we'd have a website, we'd monetize it with advertising. We would take clips from the TV show, put them onto the website and onto AOL so that we could drive audience through the front door with Eminem and U2 and No Doubt and Sheryl Crow and the NWA reunion, all these things that we did. And so we built all that and put it together, but we had to launch a TV show by January 20th of 2000. And part of that time was holiday and everything else. And so somehow, I even have a hard time believing it today, we were able to get that TV show launched on time. We hired Audrey Morrissey, who was a dear friend of mine from MTV, convinced her to come and join us. She's now the many-time Emmy award-winning executive producer of The Voice, but she was our head of production, and she put it together and we launched it on time. But the USA Network deal that Amanda did was important because we knew that a television show might take time to develop. We also knew that a music television show doesn't always get ratings, but can be important to developing an artist and getting exposure. So we had to own the time so we couldn't get canceled. Also, so we could sell the ads across our webs, so we were looking to have a convergent play. We wanted to be able to market things from compact discs to our website, to AOL, to the television show. We had to own the time. So we essentially had a network within a network. And that was the time that we bought on Monday nights at 11 o'clock on USA, after the #1 lead in on all of cable, which was Monday Night Raw, at the time, I guess it was WWF at the time. Now it's WWE, right? So yeah. So that's what we did. We bought that time, and then we sold the ads to make the money back and built the show. And the math didn't exactly work, but it was an investment in the future, right?
That is correct. And it enabled us to do some crazy things like, never before done. Like what always comes to mind, do you remember Meet the Beatles?
Yes. Meet the Beatles we did a lot of firsts there. Every morning at 10 o'clock, Glenn Kino, who was our head of technology and creative director, we'd sit in my office at Universal, and we would come up with new things to do every day. And we were just developing new ideas every single day, streaming radio ideas, marketing ideas, other convergent plays. And the Beatles was, I don't think this was, remember, it's 2000. We were doing this thing with Volkswagens. They were our sponsor. We deployed them across the country.
They had just launched the new Turbo Beatles.
That's right. That's right. We'd launched we put these Beatles, and then we'd said to Glenn, can you figure out a way to track them and have a map on our website so people can see where the Beatles are? We'd had cameras on the front and back of them. We had the drivers that were cast to be driving around the country in these Volkswagens. You could go on our website and see where they were. You could chat with them, and you could tell them, hey, I'm in a band in Milwaukee. Will you drive over here and see my gig on Thursday night? You could meet in a parking lot and give us your demo
hand up
tapes.
your tape. If you didn't know how to upload your music, you could literally just hand in your demo.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You could hand in your demo and it would get to us. And so the amount of the technology, that nothing was off the shelf back then to stream anything, and nobody had broadband. The Farm Club TV show, we ran promos where we told people what a download was.
Yeah.
Where we tried to instruct how to upload or how to download something, So that's how we met. It was an incredible journey. It ended a little while after the NASDAQ crash. We were loaded up for a multi-billion-dollar IPO and spin out of Universal, and we were going to become gargantuanly wealthy.
My husband has never let me forget about that. All the shares that I had.
Yes, we were going to make a lot of money, but we're still here to tell the tales, and there are a lot of great stories, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so, Yeah, so that's how we met, and I think that we both it reinforced the taste that we had, that we wanted to be on the front end of the business and looking at what's next. Before that, you had been at E-Labs at UMG, and I think both of us felt like after that we were destined to continue to make things, be out and looking at the future of the business and looking out for artists and how to monetize their careers going forward, right?
Well, it was an amazing journey. It was the most fun job I've ever had. It was also the most stressful because I was supposed to be the business person who was like keeping everything in line for Universal, our, shareholder. And Jimmy, is an amazing genius, but he doesn't like to color within the lines in any
That's
way.
for sure. That's for sure.
And as you remember, I wasn't actually at E-Labs before this. In fact,
you
our
weren't.
friend Mike Bevel
Yes, who's in the chat?
Who's in the chat. Yep. Hi, Mike. Mike was doing the job that I ultimately took after Farm Club, because he was asked to come over to join what became your next venture.
That's right. Yeah, Mike was my right hand at Press Play, which later became Napster when I left, and Mike replaced me as the CEO at that time. That's right. I'd forgotten that you had, but we were going to, I think.
No, so the funny thing about this is that before Farm Club, I was like a mid-level business affairs person at Mercury Records, working for Julie Swidler. And in the late 90s, I was really intrigued by the internet. And so I put my hand up for all of the internet deals. And there weren't that many of them. The funny thing is that many of the people who I was figuring out the internet with at the time, like Courtney Holt, who was at A&M Records, and Marie Donahue, who was in the Polygram corporate department, we're all still friends today. And so when Seagram bought Polygram, I was one of a handful of attorneys who knew what the internet was. And so they kind of plucked me out of my label and stuck me in the corporate legal department. And there was a lot of frothy deal making going on because it was 1999. And, the senior people at the company were concerned because they were uncomfortable saying the word MP3. And so because I was comfortable saying it, they were uncomfortable. It gave me, this like tiny but significant edge. And so that's how I ended up being asked to put together the business plan for Farm Club, because I had met Zach through the sale of the concerts division to now I'm blanking on the company, which no longer exists.
Yeah.
And so that's how he knew that I could say MP3, and voila.
At that time,
afterwards, I think you and I both, and even Jimmy, I think, got bit by the bug. Like, we loved the freedom to create something that just didn't exist and figure out what was going to work for the consumer.
Yeah, that was
innovative.
Yeah, that was the opportunity to work within a company to develop something that was new and part of the future, and to experiment with it was something that I was able to do 2 more times at Universal, which we can get into in a little bit. I was able to have 2 more at bats at Universal. It was an incredible company to work for, to be able to be kind of the special ops CEO that I was. Anything that wasn't about a record company for a minute there, they would not lose my number, and they would call me for incredible opportunities.
I think you were their entrepreneur in residence.
Yeah, I think I kind of was. So that we can make this sort of like a playlist, Amanda, and sort of skip around for variety. Why don't we why don't we, before we get into like where we come from and how you became a lawyer and your journey, why don't we tell people that are just tuning in now where what we're doing now, okay? What our current jobs are. Then we can go back to kind of the beginning because Tom gave us that introduction. So why don't
you first.
Oh, I was going to say, why don't you tell us what it's like to work at the phone company, at the iPhone company?
Oh, okay. So I work for the world's largest fruit company, and it's been quite a wild ride. I've always been a fangirl. Probably the main reason why I am at Apple is that when I was running the deal making teams at Universal, I did the first iTunes deal in 2002, and with my good partner in crime, David Weinberg, and I became friends through the course of the deal with Eddie Q, and he and I have been friends ever since. And that was an incredible experience where I had the opportunity to actually negotiate with Steve Jobs, which, fighting through the torrent of the reality distortion field, Doug and Jimmy, who had put me up to it, were really just laughing themselves silly.
Amanda, we could spend a whole other webinar on my day with Steve Jobs, up there when
yes,
he and I had
indeed.
our one-on-one to brainstorm. I could do a book on that one, like a lot of people who've had the chance to spend time with him.
So to make a long story short, when I realized that I didn't feel like I had anything to accomplish at Universal, and that while I loved the people that I worked with, and it was a very stable job, I realized that just wasn't enough for me. And so I made the decision to leave. And while I was considering various options at that point, I knew that I did not want to go to another record company. I was looking at music companies that were in different, kind of taking a different take on music. I was talking to film studios, and Eddie and I had talked for probably about a decade about whether, I might come to Apple, but he could never articulate what I would be doing. And when I was happy in my job and well compensated, and I, have a family, it seemed crazy to just kind of leap into the darkness with no idea what you'd be doing. And at Apple, we say, we don't hire people to tell them what to do. We hire them to tell us what they should be doing. And that, in fact, has been my experience. So I came and at the point of decision, right, I thought, I have to scratch that itch. I've thought about this for too long. And there are, other interesting things out there, but there's nothing that has the reach of Apple. And they had just launched Apple Music 6 months before. And while they only had 2 subscription services at that point, they had their iCloud, which is their storage subscription, and an Apple Music. Eddie already knew where he wanted things to go. So the whole idea was as I formulated, I was going to help create these marketing and distribution channels that were evergreen, through which the world of subscriptions to come could travel. And that is in fact what happened. I have a team that is based both out of the US, out of Cupertino and Los Angeles. And I also have a team that is based in London that rolls out the business models geographically, that's divided geographically. But I also have been able to do things like I led the acquisition of Shazam in 2018, which is, of course, the most well-known music recognition engine, but
Sure.
also was a huge driver of subscriptions for Apple
Mhm.
Music. And then from there, because I had this experience, I naturally took on the deal making for music rights across a host of things, and now that sort of expanded. So I do it for, my team does it for music and Fitness Plus, which is our
Mhm.
fitness subscription,
Sure.
and for podcasts. So and then I get to kind of envision where we need to be. And so in 2021, we bought Primephonic, which was a classical subscription service, a specialist, because we realized that we were not doing a good job for classical music lovers. My Jonathan Gruber, who strangely also worked for me at Universal, but was the head of classical for Apple. We figured out a plan called Getting to an A, and it was going to take us a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, well, maybe we can accelerate this through an acquisition, and we looked at many different ways that we could enter. And ultimately, we found this company, Primephonic, that had what we were missing, which was they had created the metadata. They had identified 115,000 works, like Beethoven's Fifth Symphony,
Mm-hmm.
and that enabled us to relaunch the service. I mean, we just launched Apple Music Classical, which is a companion app to your Apple Music subscription.
And congratulations, a ton of great attention, and it seems to be getting amazing reviews from just about everybody.
It's been incredible. I mean, our CEO, Tim Cook, he reads all the emails that he gets every morning. And
I'm going to make a
more
note of that.
often
I'm
than
going to
not,
maybe send him one. Hold on.
yeah, no, he will definitely, and if you have an issue, it will get forwarded to one of his people to get a response.
Okay.
And sometimes he often gets a fair amount of complaints, but we have gotten a really positive response for Apple Music Classical.
Deservedly so.
Super, super gratifying.
Yeah.
So Andy, why don't you talk about, and maybe this is where we're going to get into the Steve Jobs conversation, but how you ended up where you are right now, because it is a journey that kind of goes back to the ways you like to re-envision a traditional medium.
Yeah, sure it does. I think it was again, congratulations on the Apple Classical. It's awesome. Everybody download it and get on there. And everybody in the chat there, download it. You've got time here during my story to do that. Well, you can multitask. So my roots go back, as we'll get into in a little bit, to in audio and listening behavior and radio, back to my childhood, before I was even a teenager. I think I was probably 12 years old, maybe 13. And so I've been thinking about how people listen for a really long time. And I had the great fortune of applying that thinking to a lot of different radio stations and media properties. But I had a meeting. I had got a call from Steve Jobs, actually. I remember, because I was in my closet and I was home, and he called me himself. And it was like, Andy, this is Steve Jobs from Apple. And I said, yeah, okay, I'm familiar. And he said, are you familiar with the iTunes and these other things? I said, of course I am. Yes, thank you. And so at that time we had a chat, and he said, look, your name keeps coming up, and I'd love to have you come up to Cupertino and have a brainstorm with me and just get to know each other and have a conversation. And my office will set it up. And you know, my wife, Amanda, not my other Amanda, was in the other room. And of course I did one of these that reminded me of the time Mick Jagger called me when I was at MTV. And I was like, okay, Steve Jobs, thank you for calling, you know, so she could hear me. Yes, Steve Jobs, thank you. You know, I will talk to you soon, Steve Jobs. Thank you, you know. And so a couple months went by before I heard from him again. So I kind of figured that I would not see him. And I didn't know how to call and say, hey, I got a call from Steve. Should I, you know? So I just had to wait. And so I eventually go up and I see him. And this is during iPod 1. And I'll cut this story down, but it was basically, I had to think about what I was going to talk about. I knew you need to have big ideas when you go to see him. I went up to see him. We sat down in his conference room and he said, what's your big idea? And I said, you know, listening to anything other than music, other kinds of audio on demand is nascent. You know, you've been going to the corner to the Blockbuster Video to get a tape and watch a movie on demand for years. There's on-demand viewing, but there's not on-demand listening. Imagine mapping the Smithsonian. Imagine being able to create your own morning show, the length of your commute with entertainment, with ABC News, if you like, or NBC, comedy or horoscopes, no sports, lots of sports, in between your songs on iTunes. Imagine being able to, you know, to do that. And he leaned back and he said, that's a very small idea, you know, and what else have we got? And then he proceeded to tell me that everything I had done except MTV was pure shit, you know, and he would not let up on me until I told him that I thought iTunes was great. And he thanked me. And then he asked me why the hell I was there. And I said, because you asked me up to get to know each other. And so far it's going great. And then he laughed out loud and that diffused everything. And we had a really nice chat because I'd been warned that if it's not going well, you can just jump. You said you won't be back, so you can just leave. I'd been prepared by the handlers, you know? And he said, you're all right. He said, we're going to talk about you behind your back and maybe get back to you. This is how we ended our conversation.
That is classic Steve. And
Yep.
I think that's his, he respected people who can stand up to him.
Yeah. I learned that. I had worked for, you know, Mel Karmazin. I worked for Barry Diller, Sumner Redstone. Yeah, I've worked for a lot of colorful and powerful characters. So I've always found that humor and shooting straight and standing up for myself was the best defense against that sort of thing. Having a lot of confidence and being prepared, which I was, and that was great. So fast forward years later, 2018, I'm having lunch with my friend Kevin Wall, and he's asking me what I'm going to do next. And I said, you know, listening is broken. Podcasts are the length of albums, and singles are what works on radio and for discovery. Imagine if every song was an hour long. How could playlists work? How could radio work for discovery? It just wouldn't. We need to make discovery of podcasts as frictionless as discovering music. And so I want to break podcasts down into excerpts and play them out in a stream like a radio station and have it just play and have people discover podcasts with their ears instead of their eyes and instead of reading reviews and looking at little avatars and things. And so Speaker, SPKR, was born that day. And I just dreamed of putting a deck together that would say in my investment deck, that's a small idea, Steve Jobs. You know, I wanted to be able to, to put that in my deck. But of course, so we built it. It became one of the apps we love in the Apple App Store. Thank you very much. And we were off and running with a really great app. And I felt like we were really right about it. And then the pandemic hit. And I was sort of adrift running the app by myself, a bootstrapped app that was funded through friends. And after that, a great company and a guy, John Neerman, who is the CEO and founder of Loop Media, a small digital out-of-home business that was trying to grow and figure out its way, said, I'd love to have you come in and be alongside me and help grow the company. We're going to go on, you know, the New York Stock Exchange in a couple of years. And I want to really make sure we shore everything up, especially in music. And so he bought my company and took care of all my shareholders, which was fantastic. And we are today on the New York Stock Exchange. And we are a rapidly growing business that specializes in putting television into businesses. And we've got today, as Tom mentioned at the top of the webinar here, we've got over 200 music video and non-music entertainment, news, sports, and information channels. Real proud of the team I've got there. Some folks I've worked with, like Greg Drebin and Darcy Fulmer, for over 30 years, going back to MTV. So I've got an amazing team, and they do incredible work. And it's been an amazing experience. So that's where I am today. That's where it is.
I'm gonna go to the question that Tom has from the Q&A, but I first have to ask him, I'm curious. You recently went on the stock exchange. When you ring the bell, is it like a giant red button? What do you actually do? Or do you have like the gong?
Well, we have, you have the gavel. You take pictures with the gavel. That's downstairs by Jim Cramer on CNBC down on the floor, which we did that. But upstairs at the top, on that podium up there in that balcony, there are buttons, and it's like a red button, and you do press that to ring the bell. You don't, and you press the button, and there's a backup button it's funny because they were going over all the rules with John, who got to push the button. And I was sort of standing behind him, and I thought, man, I'm glad I'm not pushing the button. I already forgot all those rules. There were all these things. And I was thinking, think about it. We messed this thing up. Maybe we don't open the market, and then, there's $1 billion lost or something, so the pressure was on for a couple of minutes, but a really great moment to be able to be on, to be up there and to do that. A total bucket list thing. And all we could do was think about Trading Places, in the movie, and turn those machines back on, Mortimer, and all that. We were all reliving, learning about the stock market from the Trading Places movie. So you're saying Tom had a question?
Yeah, I'm going to read it. So it's from John Loken. Thank you. Okay. As two leaders in the digital music revolution, what do you make of the potential opportunities and risks of AI and machine-made art? How do we reorder incentives for platforms like Spotify or TikTok, where a larger supply of synthetic music would help the bottom line? Do you want to take first swing, Mr. Schuon?
Sure. Yeah, it is something to be concerned with. As like Amanda, I think I made my first dollar, playing off the back of artists, playing their songs on the radio. And I have forever, since high school, been looking for ways to help artists connect with their audiences and to monetize it. I think it's noble work. I think it's incredible to work with artists. And to value them, artists of any kind, and to help them to monetize their careers. So the idea that machines could take away, could take away some of that from artists is troubling, for sure. I think at the end of the day, absolutely, machine-made things all around can be will be great facsimiles to the real thing, but I sure hope that AI does not replace the heart and the passion and emotion that a songwriter has, or that a musician has. I don't know about you, Amanda.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like, in the first instance, what Spotify did with AI was to create a, AI DJ who does the interstitials in between songs. And, their algorithm, which is machine learning, right, is what generates their playlists, right? They're all about the algorithm. That's AI. And that's just always been there. I am, and there are all kinds of quote virtual bands. There's Gorillas, thank you, Damon Albarn. There's the Universal has a Bored Ape band called Kingship, that's created from these Bored Ape NFTs. But there are real musicians underneath it.
Yeah.
And Spotify is, it's a huge audience, right? So they have a lot of leverage, but they need a license.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
got to come back for a license every couple
That's
of
right.
years.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think the consumer is necessarily well served. I mean, it depends on the genre of music you like.
Of course.
I guess if you were into house music, you could kind of see maybe, that's something where you might be able to create something that would be passable, that isn't created by humans, but all of the pieces that the machine is manipulating have to be created by humans.
That's right. And also too, if you think about it, if you play it out, it's like when we all have guilty pleasure pop songs that we like, and maybe it's just a single and we enjoy it on a playlist. But what's really in jeopardy, and what is the lifeblood of the future of the art and of the music business is developing artists, not songs, is because those artists play in concerts where all the revenue comes from. How are you going to, what kind of merch are you going to buy, and what kind of concert are you going to go to for music created by AI, right? So we really do have to, we really do have to continue to find ways to put a face on artists and to develop them so that all those revenue streams can be had. And so that, we all love going out to see live music. That really that's not possible with AI, I mean, and there have been fake groups. I mean, that go back to whether it's the Partridge Family or, whatever. There have been the Monkees, which ended up being a real act, but I think that's what needs to be protected. And that's what we need to focus on, is how to continue to develop artists, whether they're a singer-songwriter or a band, a group, because that drives the entire ecosystem of the music business.
Well, and I also I agree with you. You will not create fans of something that doesn't have a soul. I would say this is one of the foci of Apple Music, right? We're all about human curation. One of the key differentiators for us is what we call radio. We have 3 radio stations, which are essentially, linear streams that are also available on demand, of extraordinary artist interviews, amazing playlists created by DJs, artist-led programs. We've had over 220 shows by Elton John, because he has an insatiable appetite for discovering new music, and he has incredible taste, and he loves to share his discoveries, and he gets so jazzed by that. Ezra Koenig from Vampire Weekend, Nicki Minaj, I mean, Carrie Underwood. We have so many amazing artists who are excited to have a platform to basically appear to their fans the way that they want. Sure. We're one of the few platforms where people play albums, where we promote albums.
Yeah.
Because we want to help artists build that fandom and enable greater connections between artists and their fans. That's kind of at the core of what we do. And while I felt that it was a business growth opportunity in classical, it also was just the right thing for us to do, because these these music fans have been left behind by streaming.
Yep. Yep. They really have. It's funny, we were talking about art and artists, and I happened to see that Bertus Downs was in the chat, who I love and I haven't spoken to in a long time. And I was just telling the story yesterday about how last week was the 30th anniversary of the release of Everybody Hurts, one of the great singles of all time from REM. And I was telling the story about how I got a parking ticket in front of Michael Stipe's house down in Athens, and we were just talking about that particular single and how important it was and how great it was and what an amazing band REM was. And, you know, sort of, you know, as we're talking about artists and the full 360, the REM just popped in my mind, you know, is an incredible group that, you know, that celebrated, you know, just this last week, and one of the great songs of all time in my mind. So, hey, Bertus. So I don't know. I want to keep track of the time here, Tom. You know, I know that you sort of gave our bios up at the top, and Amanda and I could talk forever probably about, you know, where we came from. You mentioned how I'd been like, you know, a boy DJ, and, you know, worked my way up through the business and radio, and then MTV hijacked a perfectly good radio career, and I went there and all that. And I wanted to hear, though, a little bit from Amanda, and then maybe we both talk about kind of what makes us tick and where we come from and our families and some of that stuff. And then we have a lightning round prepared to go through some questions, which could be really fun, right? Which is a good way to get to know people as well. But how are we doing on time here? We got about 10 minutes. Is that what we got?
12
minutes. Okay.
12 minutes.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's
go as long as you want to,
okay.
guys.
All right, great. Well, don't say that, because I can be pretty long-winded. So don't say that. But okay, well, but just sort of jumping around here, Amanda, what I've noticed, and what I'd love to hear is, because we can talk about, you know, and just in a nutshell, for me, I'm very fortunate that I knew what I wanted to do at a very young age. I immediately sort of at about 12 or 13 realized that I wanted to be in the entertainment business broadly, probably more narrowly broadcasting and music. And I was able to make it happen. My very first boss ever, Daniel Cook, is in the chat, which is incredible, who I stay in touch with all these years later. Would not be here without Daniel, who took this kid who won the amateur hour by sending in a postcard that launched my career by giving me a 1-hour radio show at 7:00 on a Sunday night. And that was the tape that became the key to open the door to my career the next day, when I showed up at the station in the lobby and asked to speak to the program director. And then he let me hang out there for the summer, and eventually somebody didn't show up for work, and I got to go on the air and kind of talked my way on, and you know, the rest is kind of history. But for you, how did you become an attorney? Where are you from, and how did that happen, real quickly? Then we'll go into the lightning round, maybe the questioning lightning round.
Sorry, Andy, I was just reading the chat to see if there were other questions that I needed to pull out.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone asked how old I was. I know my mom drove me to the station that Monday morning after the amateur hour, because I didn't have my driver's license yet. So I think I was just on the edge of 16 then. Yeah.
Well, you know, the funny thing you say that, because I never intended, like, if you had asked me 25 years ago where I would be, it wouldn't be this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You worked for like an air cargo company or something at one point.
But it's even more than that. I wanted to go into politics. So I actually went to law school because I, you know, had big ambitions. I worked for my senator. I went to Georgetown undergraduate, and I worked for my senator. And, you know, there's nobody who can be quite as disillusioned as a 19-year-old college sophomore, not because of Bill Bradley, who I have, you know, undying respect for. He was an incredible man. But because it's such a lowest common denominator system. And so I kind of ended up in law school because, you know, senior year, even though I knew that I no longer wanted to pursue that path, the momentum kind of carried me forward into law school.
Mhm.
And because I have a photographic memory and I read really fast, it was not so challenging for me because those are basically the things you need to do. And then I spat out the other end and I ended up at a law firm in LA, because I had already decided that this was the lifestyle that I wanted. My father worked for an oil company. We moved my whole childhood every 1 to 3 years. So
Mhm.
I was sort of free to decide where do I want to live my life, and
Yeah.
LA was clear the right answer. Um, and um, I was one of the top billing associates my first year in the law firm, and I was totally burned out. And I was like, well, this is a huge mistake. This is not my beautiful life. And I had sort of decided, Georgetown really beats service into you.
Mhm.
That and I was an international politics major. I'm fluent in French and I speak a bunch of other languages and I love to travel. So I sort of decided like international human rights is what I need to be doing with my life.
Mhm.
And so right around that time, I had met and fallen in love with a guy who lived in New York. So I used him as the excuse, almost a year into dating to leave LA and move to New York. And I was going to, launch my international human rights career. I applied to go to Haiti as a human rights monitor.
Yeah.
And I actually got hired pending medical clearance. Um, and then the UN found out that I was a type 1 diabetic and they didn't want me on their health insurance.
Mm.
So I couldn't get clearance. And I actually got a law firm to represent me to try to fight with the UN, who actually is not
Right.
beholden to any laws. Um, and in the meanwhile, I was doing a bunch of stuff in New York. I was working for Human Rights Watch, and I happened to meet the general counsel of this group of companies on the touring side of the music business. The primary company was called Rock It Cargo, and they're freight forwarder. They specialize in getting band gear out of customs, into customs,
Right.
out of customs, all around the world. Because when you have a global tour, there's a lot of stuff you got to bring with you.
Yeah.
And the CEO was David Bernstein, and his brother Stephen was the general counsel. And I learned an extraordinary amount of things from the Bernstein brothers, including, and most particularly, which has probably led to where I am right now, is that you could do anything if you
Yeah.
put your mind to it.
That's right.
And they were really crazy entrepreneurs. And we did a lot of crazy stuff, and it wasn't as challenging for me as Farm Club because I was protected by Steven. So even though I was
Mhm.
like witnessing everything, I wasn't the one actually doing all the crazy things. But they really taught me an incredible thing. I also discovered, because I'm a huge music fan, I have
Yeah.
been making playlists since we used to call them mixtapes. And
Yeah.
I had a double deck and I would dupe them for my friends. And um and I discovered, I hadn't ever thought there was a business that you could work in
Mhm.
around music, but it turned
Right.
out like I love the perks because at Rocket Cargo, we could basically go to any show,
Yeah, sure.
and um and that my second week on the job, we bought an airline and we flew the Knicks, the Celtics, the Hawks, the Hornets, the NHL. I can tell you, I ended up as the general counsel of this group of closely held companies, that the hairiest part was the airline. Like the reports from some of those flights
Yeah.
really made your hair stand
Oh,
on
yeah.
end. Like HR nightmare. Um, and it was from there, it was, Stephen who taught me how to make deals.
Yeah.
Um, and so I went from being a litigator to a transactional lawyer, and that's ultimately, but our office was at Kennedy Airport. So I would like drive from the city to JFK every day.
Right.
And um, and I decided that was not really the lifestyle I wanted to continue. And I went from there to this Polygram record label, Mercury Records, that was led by Danny Goldberg and worked for
Right.
Julie Swidler, who's now the general counsel of Sony Music, but
Mhm.
was the head of business and legal affairs at Mercury. And that's how I got into the real music business.
Yeah.
And everything else is just sort of like the reaction that you have to the opportunities that are presented.
Do you think today, I was lecturing last week or the week before last at Fordham to students that are going to be lawyers if they pass the bar this year. I was a guest lecturer there 2 weeks ago, I guess, on spring break. That's what I do on my spring break. I go to universities and teach classes. But I was saying that it was my experience that I think that today becoming an attorney, and then attorneys seem to be getting great jobs in the music business and throughout the entertainment business if they can really show that they're problem solvers. Do you think that's because the industry is more complicated today? Do you think that's why? I mean, you and I both know so many people who are leading businesses now with a law background. Do you think that's because of the complexity?
Well, I think intellectual property, the idea that you can own an idea is kind of particular, and it's music is super complicated because in any song there are at least two property interests, right? There's the recording and the artist who sang on it, and then there's the composition underneath it. That concept is really hard for people. I think that law school, I mostly talk people out of going to law school unless they have a really specific idea why they want to do it. My only regret, really in my entire career, is that I didn't do my JD MBA, because as my career turned out, just having those quant concepts and, I have a practical MBA because I've been running businesses since Farm Club.
Sure.
But that's my only regret. I think the one thing you learn in law school, which you learn in the first year, is you learn how to spot issues.
Right.
And that's how you're able to be good at problem solving. And I would say problem solving is probably the, strongest quality, strongest attribute of every job that I've had. And I like having new problems to solve.
So we started out completely differently. I won a contest and you went to law school, and here we are, right? And this I've had such a charmed life that I feel so fortunate to have had in the business, and it's just getting started for me as it is for you, a long way ahead. I think about maybe in the final moments that we have here, maybe to talk about, kind of what drives us, and maybe do that lightning round of questions, which I think is always fun when I hear these kinds of things, to find out what people say, right? So we've got a couple of questions lined up, but I know, speaking for myself, I think one of the questions I saw a little earlier, and they've been streaming by here on the chat, was just about like, how did you, get here? How did it happen, or whatever? And for me, it's so much about hustle, and that is so much about life. And I tell people all the time that there have been so many times, and then working with Jimmy, and then working with Puffy, with Schuon Combs on a business that I have, Revolt TV, with him, that I'd founded. And being employee number one of a Schuon Combs company is that they make TV shows, reality shows about that. And when we made that company, we actually had cameras on us for 2 years. We made a reality show around that to become a movie, which I hope never comes out, but it was a lot of screaming and yelling. But anyway, it's all about hustle, and you'd be surprised how few people just don't realize that you really have to sometimes do break the rules. You need to do things that are counterintuitive. I got my job in Seattle because the ad in the trade magazine said, "Send your tape and resume, no calls." And the first thing I did was call the station and talk to the program director, and then I told him I was going to be in town in Seattle next week. Could I stop by and give him my tape? All not true, but he said yes, because, and I went up to Seattle, and I got up there and I gave him my tape, and I got the job. And, you think about all these things in our careers, it's about hustle. And I think we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the people we've worked with, and, Jimmy and Puffy in particular, I tell people, look at these people that I've had, that these incredibly successful people that I've worked alongside. And I'm thinking about and it relates to the iPhone, actually, interestingly enough, since you work at the phone company. Puffy said to me when we were launching Revolt, he said, Andy, and this I think really sums up, there's no mystery as to why Schuon Combs is as successful as he is. He said, Andy, you know that little music note that's on the iPhone? You know that music note? I said, yeah, the app, the iTunes, the Apple Music, the app on the phone. He said, yeah. He says, we got to make sure that the Revolt app is on there too, on the phone when people buy it. When they ship it out and there's the weather and there's the music note, there's got to be that R for Revolt there. It's got to be on the phone. And I said to him, you know, that's an Apple app. That's a proprietary app. They ship the phones out with their own apps on them. They don't put apps like Revolt on the iPhone when it goes out. And he looked at me and he said, oh, so you already called Apple and you asked Eddie Q if the Revolt app could be on the phone. And I knew he had me at that point, right? I said, well, no, I haven't asked Eddie Q if we could put the Revolt app on the iPhone. He said, well, maybe today's the day he's going to say yes. You don't know unless you ask. And maybe because no one asks, because they know that you don't do that, maybe we will be lucky enough. And he was right. And you have to try and you have to push through, you know, and that is, you know, that's the kind of people I've been lucky enough to work around. And so when we talk about the hustle of Jimmy Iovine, and we could go on all day long about the experiences I had with him. I went on my very first vacation, nice vacation to the Caribbean when I was at MTV. And it was my first time to get away. And it was to a resort that didn't have phones or TVs or anything. And I arrived there. I probably worked for 10 years before I had a vacation. Finally, I'm making some money. I go to a fancy vacation. I show up in the room and there's a boombox there with a stack of Interscope CDs and a note from Jimmy that says, for your vacation listening pleasure, love, Jimmy. That's Jimmy Iovine. He found out where I was going on vacation. Somehow he got that music down there in a boombox. And all I did was listen to Don't Speak by No Doubt and One Headlight by the Wallflowers and whatever else at that time. So those are the people I've had the pleasure of working with throughout my career, that they keep you on your game. Mel Karmazin was like that. Trip Reed was like that. John Sykes is like that. Judy McGrath and Tom Freston like that. Just a long list of incredible people that have been mentors and bosses and colleagues, you know, pretty amazing. So you want to do the lightning round real quick, Amanda?
Let's do it.
Let's do the lightning round. I don't have a bell or a buzzer or anything. We can take turns asking the questions. I know people have to get on with their day here.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite song of all time if you had to pick one?
My favorite song of all time, if I had to pick one, is oh man. You go first. And
Okay. I'm going to say for me, what always comes to mind first, genuinely, is Let's Stay Together by Al Green. I think it's a beautiful song. I think it's as contemporary today as it was when it came out. I love that song.
I would say
Steve Funk said In My Life, which I listened to this morning, Funk. Steve Funk was working at KOZZ in Reno when I went by for a tour the night that my mom took me there. And then I sent in the postcard for the amateur hour. That's a great song. Yep.
I think the one that really always makes me happy, and so I keep coming back to it, is Lovely Day by Bill Withers.
Bill Withers. Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. Is there one song that will make you tear up anytime you hear it?
Sarah McLachlan, Angel.
Oh, beautiful. For me, this might sound corny, but it's really true. If we played it right now, it works every time. For me, is Video Killed the Radio Star by the Buggles.
That makes you cry?
It does, because it represents it represents this time in my life, in my MTV time, which was, there's something about, it's hard to articulate the feeling of being at the center of, the pop culture universe in the 90s at MTV, and all the things we did, the mission that we were on. We were so mission driven to move culture. And, I'm a kid who, like everybody else, when MTV came out, had to have it. We sat around and we convinced my dad, because I told him he could get HBO if we got cable, because I wanted to get MTV, that we found out when the cable guy showed up and we were sitting there with Doritos and Pepsi and waiting for MTV. The cable guy came and knocked on the door and said, "Your house is not cable ready. We can't hook up the cable to your house. There's no cable from the phone pole all the way to your house. And so we can't install it." And we were so deflated. He said, "You've got to dig a trench, 18 feet deep and 6 feet wide, all the way across your backyard to that telephone pole, or there's no MTV." And so sure enough, we dug that trench, me and my pals, across a half acre of my parents' backyard in rural Nevada. And a week later, he came back out and he installed the cable. We plugged it in. And 10 years later, almost exactly, I was on the 24th floor of 1515 Broadway as the new head of programming of MTV, just 10 years later. And it changed my life. It took me to the White House, to Bono's house, to you name it, And so it was such an extraordinary time that when I hear that, it feels like it goes to the center of my being. So anyway, that's that.
So if you had to pick another career, what do you think it would be?
I love making things, and I consider myself to be a creative. And so I think I would, if I wanted to switch places with somebody, it'd be Ralph Lauren. You know why? I'd like to make a table, a fork, polo shirt, design things, or I might be an architect. I like design. I like art and creativity. I like fashion. I spent some time working at Vogue, as a little respite with Anna Wintour. I loved it. So yeah, I think I would be a designer, maybe. How about you?
Well, it's interesting because I went to the Georgetown School of Foreign Service, and unsurprisingly, the CIA did a fair amount of recruiting there. And, for a nanosecond, I, considered how cool it would be to really understand what was going on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same instant, I realized how depressing it would be to really understand what was going on in the world. But I do, because I, as I said, I love to travel, and I'm like, my current job, because it's global, I really get involved in like a lot of geopolitical discussions. I feel
Sure.
like my current job is like the perfect combination of all of my experience and education, but I have always been interested in diplomacy. So I think that would have been, maybe the Foreign Service would have been the path not taken.
Yeah, makes sense. What are your causes today? Do you sit on any boards, or what are your particular causes?
Well, I'm a cancer survivor, so
As am I. Share that as
I'm
well.
17 years out from stage 3 breast cancer. So I've done work for 20 years for City of Hope, which is how we met.
That's right, we did.
And I kind of, consider it like an insurance policy. I also do support all of the usual human rights things because, I'm an internationalist. My mom's European, so
yeah.
Médecins Sans Frontières, Human Rights Watch, ACLU. Those are my causes. I also am a voting member for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is super fun.
Super fun. I was looking at the chart at the viewer at the fan
Ballot
voting that's going on right now, and I was surprised to see how far down Soundgarden was. They're down at the bottom right now. Anyway, yeah, I'm in our family, among other things, the arts are really important in education. My wife's on the board of PS Arts here locally, been involved in that for a really long time. I'm on the board of Teach for America, the LA chapter. I mean, getting great educators to educate our kids is extraordinarily important so we can crank out great humans,
Amen.
Yeah. So let's wrap up with, like, I was thinking, because if for any of us who are watching Succession or love wealth porn and all of that stuff, how about one or two quick stories about, like, from our favorite rock brush with greatness story, possibly, or experience maybe. Do you have
Well,
one?
so for me, it was the week that we spent with U2 when they were preparing to appear on Farm Club.
Yeah.
On the TV show. Because I had no idea how accessible they were. And,
Lovely guys.
Bono, yes, and The Edge, who I had the opportunity to interact with in their many interactions at Apple, and to develop a relationship that was really incredible for me, because I had always been a huge fan. My husband and I fell in love to their soundtrack.
It's amazing. Well, I will just quickly tell my story. Actually, is also U2, which this one is just incredible. I was leaving New York for Madison, Wisconsin, where my parents live. My dad worked at the University of Wisconsin at this point as an executive. I'm on Chris Blackwell's jet with the island logo on the tail, and a bunch of us are going to see the show in Madison at the big stadium, and I'm going to take my parents to see their first rock concert ever. So I get them, they have passes, and I send a car for them. We're going to meet at the stadium, and I'm in the air, and our plane is late landing. We left late. I think we were waiting for Chris, and we were late leaving with Chris Blackwell. We land in Madison. This is sort of early cell phone, so my parents didn't have a cell phone. I'm getting to the venue knowing I sent my parents to a giant stadium rock concert, and I'm wondering where they are. So I'm literally running into this giant stadium backstage. And I see Paul McGinnis, their former original manager. And I said, Paul, have you by any chance seen my parents? And he said, oh, John and Betty. Yeah, they're having dinner with the lads. And I, how the stadium's curved like this, I walk around the corner and I see at a table, I see Bono and The Edge sitting there pouring a glass of wine to my dad, and they're chatting with my parents and interrogating them about me. Then we go up onto the sound. So and my parents think that's just what you do. You go to a show and you eat with the band. And so then we're on the soundboard. And again, my dad is a state employee, works at the University of Wisconsin. We are standing on the soundboard out in front of 60 or 80,000 people with the governor of Wisconsin, who I introduced to my dad, which was hilarious. And at the end of the show, I said to my mom, my dad had to go to work. I said, Mom, the guys have asked us if we want to go to the after party. And would you like to come? She said, well, I like Mr. Edge. He's very nice, and he's a great guitar player. And I said, well, it's in Chicago, and we're going to fly with them to Chicago right now. She's like, okay. So my mom goes along with it. We get in a motorcade, a police escort to the tarmac, get on the U2 jet, and we fly to Chicago and go to the Ritz-Carlton for an after party. And my mom is on the plane with us and U2 and a bunch of other people. And the first thing Edge says is, how did Betty enjoy the gig? That's my all-time favorite. And there are plenty more, but hard to believe even to this day. Yeah. Anyway.
And
How do we do,
probably
Tom? Do we need to
impossible.
wrap it up? Do we want to answer any questions? Are we ready to stick a fork in this thing?
I think you guys have done a great job. That was a beautiful mic drop story you just told, Andy. I don't know that you could possibly top that one.
Yeah.
Clearly you guys are exactly what I told the audience you were, and that is literally the two smartest people in the room. And I can't thank you enough for coming on the program and sharing some wisdom and some inspiring stories. the chat today, I think, kind of manifests exactly that. So thank you for just being simply awesome to both of you.
No, thank you. I'm sorry we didn't answer more
thank you.
questions. Yeah, I'm sorry we didn't get through them. Maybe we can
This
reunite with some of these folks. Again, people that are our good friends that are on there. That would be great.
Well, maybe we'll have a part 2 to this conversation sometime later in the year.
All right. It was
You
fun.
always want the audience to want more, right?
Leave them
That's
wanting
right.
more.
To the audience, thank you very much for your patronage here. We are off next week because I'm off to the desert, but we'll be back in 2 weeks. And again, thank you to everyone for your time and attention. Be nice to everybody. The world needs that right now.
For
And
sure.
we'll see you on the flip side.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Love you,
Thanks,
Amanda.
Tom.
See ya.
See you later, Andy.
Bye.